Okay, I had another part to do, and I reviewed the message I reviewed the message, and I realized that I left some things out that I said I would bring out, and I left out a couple of scriptures. I was going to drop them in the comment section, so I decided to go ahead and add another part to this. And this one is Paul the robber. Of course, we understand, from the message how Peter was thrown under the bus, and Paul is again known for throwing people under the bus. And here we have Galatians 2:11 through 14. We seen here, this is example of Peter being thrown under the bus. And, Paul, we're going to find out, he's robbing Peter. This is what he is. He's a robber. Paul is a robber. You're going to see, he said it himself. He called himself a robber. It's one thing for someone else to call you something bad. It's another thing for you to call yourself something bad. And this is what he done. He called himself a robber. So this is where the saying comes from. Rob Peter to pay Paul. Now when Peter had come to Antioch, watch this. Remember now, Peter going to say good things about Paul. Paul, our brother. Paul's writing hard to understand, and the unlearned twist them to their destruction. These are the things he said. Paul, as they twist and destroy themselves with other scriptures, twisting the scriptures, he's referring to Paul letters being scripture. And we know that's not the case. The only place where it's referring anything in the New Testament referring to as scripture. But here he is, Paul. Peter had came to Antioch. I withstood him to his face. So you see, he's saying he confronted him. He had to. This is something that, he proclaimed. He's saying, is this true? Probably not. Just making himself look good here. He says, I withstood him to his face because he was to be blamed. So he's being blamed. Now, who is it that blame and point the finger at the righteous but the enemy? And if our brother, if our sister do have something that they're doing, shouldn't we go to them privately? Should we be writing about it and exposing to the whole world some weakness? Out of all the people trying to expose something, this man was a murderer. Let's not forget who he was. He was a murderer and was marked for death. And this is something, he's not the one, and he couldn't handle the situation even if he was to handle the situation. But this is something that should have been, if this was the case, it should have been done in private. This is not the way you do it, to write about it and tell everybody about it. For before certain men came from James, he would eat with gooey. But when they come, he withdrew and separated himself. In other words, he's eating with gooey. They're not supposed to be blending in, eating with gooey, having a good time with gooey. And this is how they carried themselves. He withdrew, separated himself, fearing those who were of the circumcision. And the rest of the Yahudim also played the hypocrite with him. So you understand, when you read his letters, he had a problem with those of the circumcision. He had a problem with those of, those that was Yasharal. He had a problem with them, and he's calling them out. And the rest of again, this is something else he's not clear on. Who are these people he's talking about? The rest? What is rest? What rest? How much rest? What percentage of rest? All of them? Half of them? A quarter of them? 3/4 of them? How much is the rest of them? He said the rest of the Yahudim also played the hypocrite with him, so that even Barnabas was carried away with their hypocrisy. So Barnabas left, went with Paul, and they went on their journey. They end up bumping heads, and Barnabas had to come to himself and left Paul. So since he did that, Paul threw Barnabas under the bus, throwing his name into the hat as being a hypocrite also. He said, but when I saw that they were not straightforward about the truth of he's trying to say Bashar, I said to Peter before them all, if you being a Yahudi live in the manner of Gui and not as Yahudis? Why do you compel Yahudis to live as Yahudi? So he's trying to tell him, you're trying to tell them to keep Torah, and you're not keeping the Torah. Why are you telling them to keep Torah if you're not keeping the Torah? This is what he said. Now let's see him calling himself a robber. 2 Corinthians 11:8. I rob other church. I rob other assemblies. He's saying I rob other assemblies, taking wages from them to minister to you. Now this is wickedness. We know what rob is. Rob is to take something that does not belong to you. So he's stealing. He's telling us he's a thief, and this is correct. He is a thief out of his own mouth. But funny, we didn't hear this. We didn't hear this verse read in the churches. We don't hear none of the camps reading this verse out. I rob the assemblies, taking wages, and the other. Let me make myself clear here. If they bring this out, the camps, they're not going to call him a robber, and he's saying he robbed. I robbed. That makes him a robber. That makes him a thief. Rob means to take something that does not belong to you. Stealing. I'm not to steal anything from you. I don't care what it is. I'm not to take. We shouldn't be stealing from each other. Now, this is what I forgot to bring out. And I can't put this in the comment section, so that's why I'm doing another video here. And this is, I want you to understand, the scripture, the Most High commanded us to keep the commandments. Keep my commandments. Keep these statutes. Keep the Torah. And we see here, I put in keep the commandments. That's what I put in here. And you see 201 times it's in the scripture. Mostly Deuteronomy. We see here Deuteronomy, Psalms, Matthew, and Revelation. So, okay. And there's some others that's in here also that's not exact matches, but I'm sticking with the exact matches. Then I put keep his commandments. Okay, so when you see keep his commandments, once again, many in Deuteronomy, and we see here, of course, going through Joshua, 1 Kings, 2 Kings, Chronicles, we have it in Psalms. Keep his commandments. This was something that we were commanded to keep his commandments. But what you're going to notice here, it skips. This part skips the New Testament completely. Okay, so I have to put in another search. What's going on here? Commandments. All right, let's see who's talking about the commandments. And of course, we see commandments in the New. And I jump straight to Paul here. And I want you to understand. This is what I want you to understand. He never, another strong point to show he never intended for anyone to walk according to Torah. But this show and prove he never told anyone to keep the commandments. This is a huge flag. Something that they do in Christianity. The camps, okay, they're not doing it, but they're not following Paul the way they should follow Paul. They only follow Paul to a certain extent. And then it's cut off. I see the cutoff. And so here is one of the cutoffs. Paul nowhere, he mentioned commandments 7 times. He mentioned the commandments 7 times. And you have to understand this. There's a reason why. 1 Corinthians 7:19, circumcision is nothing. This man said circumcision is nothing. Circumcision is the covenant of the flesh. And the Most High said, whoever is not circumcised among you shall be cut off from the people. Cut off, shut out. And uncircumcision is nothing but keeping of the commandments of the Most High. What does that mean? But the keeping of the commandments. He's not saying keep them. That's 1. 2. 1 Corinthians 14:37. If any man think himself to be a prophet or spiritual, meaning righteous, let him acknowledge that these things that I write unto you are the commandments. In other words, what he's writing is the commandments, not what the Father has said. Ephesians 2:15, having abolished in the flesh the enmity, even the Torah of commandments contained in the ordinance. So he's saying this stuff has been abolished. It's been abolished, having abolished in his flesh The enmity, even, this even means it goes along with having abolished the Torah of commandments contained in the ordinance, for to make himself our own twain a new man. So we see here, he is not saying keep the commandments. Colossians 2:22, which are all to perish with the using after the commandments and doctrines of men. Okay. Colossians 4:10, Barnabas, touching whom received commandments. He receiving the commandments. He's saying he received the commandments from them. Okay, 1 Thessalonians 4:2. For you know what commandments we gave you. Okay. Titus 1:14. Not giving heed to, they're putting Jewish, but they're saying not giving heed to those things that Yasharal keep, and commandments of men that turn from the truth. So, okay. And lo and behold, that's it. Where is he commanding us to keep the commandments? It does not exist. He never. So this is the point. For all those that's in agreement with Paul, Paul never, ever told anyone to keep the commandments. Why is that? In his letters, he had so much to say. You don't mean to tell me he didn't tell the people to keep the commandments? Don't you think it's important to tell the people to keep the commandments? When we first come into the truth, this is something my wife said. She said, if any teacher teaching, this is what she made up in her mind. If they're teaching and they don't never mention keep the laws, statutes, and commandments, something is wrong with them. We don't need to be listening to them. And she's right. Something is wrong with a person that can't come out. He's a teacher. You know, he's supposed to be the Hebrew of the Hebrews, out in his own words. He's supposed to be the apostle of the apostles. He's supposed to be the man. But he never told anyone to keep the commandments. Don't you think this is a huge flag? And you wonder why. You wonder why the Christian churches are lawless. Because they don't keep the commandments. It's not in their vocabulary. They do not keep the commandments. They're not commandment keepers. What they think about keeping his commandments is absolutely nothing. So once again, what am I doing here? I'm showing you, people say, and even it's in his writing, that people don't understand Paul. People have a problem with him. And it's something wrong with the people. But then when the people start pointing out these things, then you have to ask yourself a question. Is this true? Okay, last scripture here. And this is Revelations 2:2. And I have to show this because this is something that we know the church is not doing and the camps are not doing. You know, they bring out Revelations 2 in 9 where it says, you know, those that call themselves Yahudim and are not, but are the synagogue of the enemy. But they never quoted this one, Revelations 2:2, and you wonder why. It's like they are not exposing these false people, but somebody's going to be exposing these people. It says, I know your works, your labor, your patience, and that you cannot bear those who are evil. These are some righteous people, and they can't bear those who are evil. We have to say something. We have to speak about this. If this man is a robber, we have to say he's a robber. If this man using the law of reversal, we have to show this man is using the law of reversal. And you have tested those who say they are apostles and are not, and have found them liars. So somebody going to be calling themselves apostles. They're going to be in the Bible. They're going to get themselves in the verses calling themselves apostles and are not. And there will be people speaking against these people. So my question, why aren't the camps calling out apostles that say they're apostles and are not, and found them to be liars? This is a question. This is something you have to ask yourself. This is a question they must answer. This is, once again, Paul the robber. Shalom.